Folks, this is Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett. Simon Foster is the guy that I co-host this with. Simon, can I ask you a question about a glorious period of, let's say, 1993, 94 thereabouts? You remember
Yeah,
that?
let's do that. Hello, everyone. Hello, Dan. I'm happy to talk about the 90s. I was married occasionally then, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, well, look, here's the thing. So I remember that time period of my life as being like looking out in a cultural sort of landscape around. That's when grunge music was really a thing.
Oh,
People
sure.
like Kurt Cobain and the Seattle Sound. And along with that, if you knew anyone who was into a little bit of sort of goth culture or just anything that's sort of slightly arty alternative, you'd know about a Vertigo comic book called Sandman. And everybody was reading that thing back in the day. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do remember it. I wasn't a comic book guy. I had goth friends, and I do vividly recall the impact that Sandman this and Sandman this. This was all before hashtags, but if there had been hashtags, it would have been hashtag Sandman everywhere. But yeah, I do recall it.
Yeah, it was one of these sort of real crossover cultural things where people who weren't really traditional comic book readers had really glommed onto the Sandman comic book series and were reading it in collected forms primarily. But some people got a bit adventurous and were reading it in floppies.
For first time I'd ever heard the name Neil Gaiman. That's where I know him from. That was the first.
Oh, look, I mean, that was definitely the case for most people. Like
Yeah.
he'd done some maybe like 2000 AD or something like that. But like Sandman was definitely the thing that broke him.
Mm.
But why I ask is because at the moment there's a new Netflix series based on the Sandman comic book series. And it's particularly notable because there's been a number of efforts to try to get it to screen. But it just struck me. I was talking to a colleague of mine who's a former goth from back in the day. And I said, hey, you remember like the Sandman comics? He's like, yeah, absolutely. And so he was more than across it because that was his cultural circles at the time. But then sitting across from us on the other side of the cubicle was let's say she's about like 27, 28 years old colleague.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Like we were back in the 90s.
yeah, absolutely. Well,
I
speaking of
was.
self, I was, a little bit on the younger teen side of things back then. But like, it was just kind of interesting, sort of this cultural gap that exists in regards to Sandman, where it was just so pervasively cross-cultural in a way that I don't think we've really seen from comics outside of superhero stuff, like
Yeah,
pretty much
agree.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just kind of fascinating that she was unaware of Sandman, but she'd certainly seen a Netflix show at this point. And
Did your aged goth friend dabble in the Netflix show? Has he got an opinion on it?
look, he wasn't super into it. But anyway, we're going to talk about that and a few more things on the podcast this week. This is Screen Watching, and we're going to play a bit of a theme song. We'll come back on the other side with some reviews and Sandman.
I like TV only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover. What, that's it? That's your movie? Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
This is Screen Watching. On the podcast, we do some reviews. We talk about some things that are just culturally out there, and then we do some more stuff. I don't know. I'll read the run sheet later and find out.
Yeah.
But I'm joined by Simon Foster. Simon, I think you will agree, this week on the show, we've got some fairly big titles. So we are going to talk about the Sandman. We're not doing a review for it, and I think that'll come clear as to why when we start talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm going to talk on the show this week about 5 Days at Memorial, which is a new Apple TV Plus series, which it's a bit of an under the radar show, but think about this as eating your vegetables, but they're pretty good vegetables. So I'm going to talk about that and also the TV remake of A League of Their Own.
And I'll be talking about The Princess, which is a new documentary about Princess Diana, which is in limited release as we speak. And I'll also be looking at, the new Jordan Peele film, which is in wide release everywhere, one of the most anticipated films of this half of the year. So, and interestingly enough, I don't know anything about 5 Days at Memorial and certainly haven't seen A League of Their Own. And I think you've not seen The Princess or Nope. So we're coming at it from very individual perspectives this week.
Yeah, but I have chased people down through tunnel systems before, so I think I kind of get the idea of The Princess.
Yeah, you do. Nice reference. I saw what you did. All right, Let's talk movies and TV.
Okay, like candles in the wind, we've got some reviews coming up.
It stinks.
Simon, I'm going to kick things off by talking about the thing that nobody's heard of, which is always the worst way to start a podcast like this. But I am going to talk about 5 Days at Memorial. And at this point, we'd play ourselves a little bit of an audio sting. And then I would load up my review, which is somewhere in my list of alphabetical files here.
Behind the scenes footage for you YouTube watchers is very exciting stuff.
Doesn't it get exciting? Okay, here we go. I got a review here. I wrote some words.
All right.
Here
we go. This ought to be good.
Okay. I should have done I should have done my stretches before we got into the podcast. Okay, here we go. 5 Days Memorial. Here we go. Me. True crime is mostly exploitative. There's something about the based on a true story tag to me that just doesn't really add any dramatic heft. It crassly set up victims' real-world tragedies as little more than entertainment for viewers. Well-told fiction, however, can provide more of an insight into the truth than a story that true crime ever can. There's a new AppleTV Plus series that explores a real-world event which saw medical patients die. But it's not really a crime investigation. The focus of the show is Memorial Hospital in New Orleans. When Hurricane Katrina hit back in late August of 2005, this was a hospital that did not have an emergency evacuation plan in how to deal with flooding. In the building, there were 2,000 medical staff and patients, and they had rising floodwaters and looters outside, a flooded basement which cut out the power to the backup generators, and they had a barely functional helicopter pad which is supporting the very limited air support the hospital was able to receive. Long story short, things were not good in that hospital.
Not at all.
Over the course of 5 increasingly hellish days, doctors had to make difficult choices based on who they believed should live or die, prioritizing health and evacuations. Multiple patients were euthanized. Now, a couple of years ago, the plan was for the second season of the TV show American Crime Story, and you remember that as a show that had People versus O.J. Simpson as its first season.
Mm-hmm.
The plan was for that show to focus on this incident. It was reported in Sherry Fink's best-selling book, 5 Days in Memorial. Now, there's an Entertainment Weekly critic, Kirsten Baldwin, who said in her review for this show, not only was no one ever convicted of wrongdoing, but putting the word crime in the title indicates a certain level of clarity around the events in question, and perhaps the comfort of a black and white outcome. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to call out in a review, because it's exactly the reason why it doesn't work as an American crime story, and why I actually thought this was such a compelling program. The crucial thing to know about the series is that at no point is there really a crime. There's no judgment that's placed on the behavior of any of the doctors. And to my mind, that's what's appealing about the series. It's a brutally honest depiction of the very difficult situation that arose when these doctors and hospital administrators found themselves without an overall... Sorry, I wrote some words here. I don't even know what I was saying. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start that sentence again and just edit it in later like magic. To my mind, that's what's so appealing about this series. It's a brutally honest depiction of the very difficult situation that the doctors and hospital administrators found themselves in, but it does not have an overall thesis statement which weighs above the story. Now, the casting for this show is impeccable. You got the two standouts being the biggest name actors in the show. You got Cherry Jones, who's wonderful as always, and she plays a hospital administrator who's left in charge of emergency management, who realizes far too late that her guidebook provides no information on what to do for this emergency. But then sorry, I've got to get a mouthful here.
Yeah, get a mouthful. I'm compelled. This sounds like a fascinating show.
Dude, it's so good. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's Vera Farmiga, who plays Dr. Anna Powell. She's the doctor at the center of some pretty serious allegations about patients who were not evacuated from the hospital. What happened there, and did she engage in actions that violated her ethical duties to the patients, or did her actions support those ethics to the maximum degree? Oh, Simon, I've really got a cough happening here.
Cough away.
Gosh, if we had the audio clips, I'd just do this straight at it. Gosh, I would have just powered through this coughing. I should have done those throat exercises earlier. Okay, here we go. The bulk of the episodes in this series are written by 12 Years a Slave Academy Award-winning screenwriter John Ridley, who's also credited as directing several episodes, along with former Lost showrunner Carlson Cuse, who wrote and directed several episodes also. This is a heavy, very human drama that I found thoroughly rewarding. It isn't entertaining TV, but it is very watchable. It's an easy watch, difficult watch, but easy. And it speaks to the ability of people who are able to make some very tough decisions in the face of some of the most extreme adversity. Not seen as responsible in the series, however, is the US federal government, who failed to send in support to rescue its citizens who are at the mercy of this weather event. There was a crime that took place over this week. It just wasn't necessarily at the hospital.
This sounds like a fantastic show, and I'm concerned that given someone whose life it is to know what's coming out on film and television, I had not heard of this. You know what's interesting? I did see Robert Pine's face turn up in some of my social feeds, and I was wondering why he's back in the scene, not just because he's Chris Pine's father, but and the commanding officer from Chips all those years ago, but he's in this terrific new series on Apple TV. So I'm very excited about tuning into this now that you've given it the rave you have. And so if you're saying it's not based on true life, it's a fictional account of.
No, sorry, I misspoke a little bit. I was really just trying to get to the fact that I don't like true crime stories.
Yeah, no,
I think I actually find them genuinely really offensive. But and mostly because I think that anything that you're trying to accomplish in a true crime story, you can generally accomplish by telling a fictionalized account of it. And it could be a roman à clef sort of an approach where you're layering a fictional story over a real one. Like, that's okay. I don't really mind that so much. But I just find there's something really gross about mining people's real life tragedies for our entertainment. Sure. I just think that's horrendous. But there are ways to do it in fiction in a way that I think is probably actually more powerful than based on a true life crime story. But what I just think is interesting in this is that it's not actually a crime story, and they're not actually using the tragedy for our entertainment. It really is laying out pretty simply, this is what happened. We're not laying judgments on anyone, and that's where the entertainment factor usually comes in for this, where the audience are on side going, "Oh, that Dr. Death, he's a cad." Sure. Like, there's none of that sort of finger waving taking place. This is all very much just showing this is the tragedy that happened. These are some of the decisions that were made. This is the investigation that took place later. And the show itself doesn't lay any blame one way or another, nor does it invite the audience to.
5 Days at Memorial is on Apple Plus TV. Can we tune into it now? Has it already hit our screens?
No. So, well, by the time people hear this podcast, it'll be, hours away. So the first 3 episodes drop on the 12th of August.
Right. That sounds like must-see TV, and I'll be tuning into 5 Days at Memorial. If I'm not tuning into 5 Days at Memorial, I might head back and see Nope.
Oh, God, I want to see this film. We'll play the clip, and then you're going to tell me some stuff about it.
After drilling deep into society... Now I'll start again. After drilling deep into society's dark soul with his racially incendiary Get Out and middle-class nightmare Us, Jordan Peele's latest twisty mystery thriller Nope is a walk on the wackier side of pop culture, where that legion of right-minded people who utterly accept that mysterious flying entities populate our skies exists, which I am loudly and proudly one, I should say. It takes place on a relatively remote ranch in the dusty Californian hills, far enough from Hollywood not to draw military attention when the space people come calling, but close enough for the increasingly depressed OJ, played by Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out, and his hyper-irresponsible sister Emerald, Keke Palmer, to run Haywood's Hollywood Horses, a family business supplying four-legged cast members to the production sector. Now, OJ is struggling to keep Haywood's afloat, its potential demise symbolic of the lessening of in-camera magic and over-reliance on effects fakery. They are making some quick cash, supplying a nearby Western theme park called Jupiter's Claim, run by ex-90s child star Ricky Park, Stephen Ewan, mostly famous for having survived a vicious and fatal onset rampage by his chimpanese co-star Gordy, rendered, somewhat ironically, in perfectly terrifying CGI. Now, Jordan Peele goes there in a series of bait-and-switch flashbacks, which are both terrifying and oblique. Part of his appeal as a filmmaker is in the way he offers up potential clues as to what the hell might be unfolding, only to rug pull whole sequences out from under his audience. Well into the film's first half, we finally get some serious UFO moments, the likes of which stargazers like me wait years and years for Hollywood to tackle. There's a cloud in the sky that never moves. There's coins, keys, and trinkets falling randomly from above. There's waves of power outages every time a shadow looms overhead. And there's the disappearance of 40 people in a split second that barely rates a further mention, all of which is in the trailer. I don't want to spoil too much, and I won't go into too much more spoiling here. Actually, I will. In one very tummy-tightening sequence, OJ finds himself in a moonlit stable as small figures loom out of dark, shadowy corners, kind of reminding you of the doppelgangers in Us. But again, it's a carpet pull moment. Peele's He's not at that self-referential stage of his career like M. Night Shyamalan is, well, not yet anyway. What he does reference all through this film is his love of cinema and primetime TV. In one beautifully played scene, Stephen Ewan recounts the horrors of his bloody sitcom experience as it played out in the Saturday Night Live skit that followed, referencing all the great Saturday Night Live players from that period. So what we ultimately get with Nope is a very mysterious movie, as challenging for the mass audience as Hollywood dares get. It's a character-driven, slow-burn story, the kind only entrusted to a director batting 2 for 2 commercially, and who has taught his audience that if they expect the unexpected, he'll promise to take you for that ride. If Nope probably lacks the precision storytelling and clarity of purpose that Get Out displayed, it also makes more assured use of visual clues and narrative puzzles than Us did. And it all pays off in this wild ride of a denouement filled with humor and spectacle that delivers in the moment, but had me reflecting upon for hours afterwards. This is really compelling American filmmaking and kind of posits Jordan Peele as arguably the most interesting mainstream filmmaker currently working in Hollywood. So Nope is a must-see for me, and it's in wide release everywhere.
Yeah, like all the hardcore screen watching fans out there, like he did try to say Dunyamon, and people were drinking.
I just went to the denouement.
Denouement, mate.
The denouement.
Truth.
Yeah, and boy, did this film. Yeah, and it tells its story at a very leisurely pace, which is a brave choice for a major studio to let a filmmaker do, but he's in such control of that storytelling that you're never not fully compelled by what's going on up on the screen.
What I like about the Jordan Peele approach, like obviously he's very much got a social progressive interest in his storytelling generally. I don't know how much of that's really on display in this film, but just from a story mechanic standpoint, I enjoy that his films always have surprises to be found in them, but they're never really just based around the plot twist. It's not like an M. Night Shyamalan film where you're just trying to work out like when's that twist going to come and when does everything change. It's never really quite like that. It really is a series of revelations that open the story up rather than just something which is like that single moment where if you blink and miss it, it'll be like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And there's half a dozen in this film that indicate that that's his favored sort of ploy as a filmmaker and what he likes to do. So far, it hasn't got gimmicky. For me, someone like Christopher Nolan has maybe jumped the shark a little bit on his non-linear storytelling, and Dunkirk was where I jumped off the Nolan train. But Jordan Peele hasn't reached that stage yet, and he does some fantastic work. Even if in the end they don't really come to mean anything, there's stuff in this film that just makes it compelling to watch and sort of aids the overall mood and tension of the story as a whole. So, which I think is really clever filmmaking.
Yeah, I got off the Nolan train at the same time you did, but then I realized that I don't need an Opal card or a Go card or anything to get back on the train. I could just tap my credit card and off I went.
Yeah, so when's Nolan? Oppenheimer, we've got our next Nolan fix, I guess. That's still a year away. So,
hey, can I? Oh, sorry, that movie that you were just talking about, the Note, is playing in cinemas now, I'm led to believe.
Started as we recorded, started today, and it is everywhere. It's one of the big, and I think as I found out this morning, just crossed over the 100 million mark, which I think is real testament to the audience's ability to stay with the film and go back a couple of times for the film. There's a lot in there to digest.
Yeah, I think the film's playing just slightly under what Us was, which is a bit disappointing, but even so, definitely keen on a film I'm keen to check out. Now, Simon, I want to move on to talk about A League of Their Own. I'm going to play the little clip. In the feature film A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks told us that Sorry, I'm going to start again. One day I'll learn to read.
This is old school podcasting where we go, no, gonna finish. Gonna start again.
Well, because we used to we've been doing it recently in like one hit and being glorious at it, but now we've got the yips. Okay. In the feature film A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks told us that there's no crying in baseball, but at least that's a more enjoyable emotion that I felt while watching. What the hell am I doing? Jesus. Okay. In the feature film A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks told us there's no crying in baseball, but at least that's a more enjoyable emotion than I felt while watching the new TV series adaptation of the film. That emotion was extreme boredom as I struggled to reach the end of the first episode. Intellectually, I'm on board with A League of Their Own. The story of an all-female baseball league team playing to keep the national pastime alive while white male ball players were out at war, that's a good story. And there are stories that are very much worthy of deeper exploration than a feature film provided, and that's certainly the case here. Further to that, you got the opportunity to use the moment that we're in to tell a story of women who didn't conform to heteronormative expectations of what it means to be a woman, and that's an interesting approach to the story, and I'm totally there for that. All of that stimulates me as someone who appreciates honest storytelling that lets characters exhibit their humanity. The difficulty that I, as a viewer, had was that there's just nothing in the script, nothing in the performances that I found especially compelling here. Compounding the problem is how anachronistic much of it felt, with dialogue and the openness to sexuality that felt forced to me as a viewer. If honesty is what we're looking for, the layering in of modern phrases and attitudes about sex robbed the series of an ability to connect with it. As with the movie, the series is focused on a wannabe ball player whose husband's off at war. She joins the league in his absence, leaving behind a life on the farm to pursue her passion. The difference with the TV series is that our protagonist isn't just looking to baseball as her passion, she's also got a hidden interest in other women. Oh, the scandal of it all. Now, worth noting is that the movie and the TV show, they both follow the Rockford Peaches as a team, but the characters are both different in the TV show to the movie, and neither of them are based on the real-life players from the actual team. Some viewers, they're going to connect with the themes of the show far more than I did, and while I simply didn't connect with the cast at all, which is led by Broad City's Abby Jacobson, who's also a co-creator of the show, but look, this one just wasn't really for me at all. I wanted to say batter up.
As a baseball fan, as a fan of the original movie, I was sort of tracking this, and as a fan of Abby Jacobson, I'm keen. I'm a little concerned that her producing partner on this, Will Graham, has a very checkered history. My God, he directed one episode of Movie 43 a decade ago. That's pretty tough.
Oh God, I can smell it from here.
He did have major production credits on Mozart in the Jungle, which was well liked by a lot of critics, but there's a lot of stuff here that I've never heard of. A lot of Onion News Network stuff. So I'm hoping it's more Abby Jacobson than Will Graham. But by all accounts, is there much baseball action? That might get me to tune in. You know, I love my baseball.
Look, maybe I prefer maybe more. What's his name? Will Graham?
Yeah.
Or is that the guy from Hannibal?
No, that's no. Will Graham's the other showrunner, the other producer of this with Abby.
Okay, so there's two Will Grahams in the world. How exciting! Look, I mean, my issue with I don't know. I'm not a big Abby Jacobson fan, to be completely honest, but you know, it's fine.
All right, so this is doing tough. It's on Prime, Amazon Prime Video as we speak.
Look, and I will say I've read a couple of reviews of it since I saw it, and they're very much mixed. There's some people who kind of feel the same way I did. Others have kind of bought entirely into it. So, as I said, I think that these are characters and a situation that some people will naturally just find a connection to in a way that if you don't have that connection, I think it's very flat on the screen.
Okay. Well, it's a shame because the film certainly has a wonderful legacy and is much loved across the board. So hopefully.
Here's the thing with the film, because I did rewatch the film, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months ago, I think.
Yep.
It was definitely not too long ago. Like that film, it does feel a little bit false in how heteronormative that film is. Like the one thing this TV series does really quite well is points out that you've got these women who some of them identify as, you know, being interested in other ladies, but then there's others who just don't really conform to the idea of what a woman's supposed to look and feel like. And while they sort of touch upon that, like it's certainly not really to any sort of meaningful level within that film. It really is just a story about some, you know, good old gals getting out there and playing some baseball with like a bit of antipathy from some of the men around. But I don't know, broadly, I just don't think it really touched upon some of the more interesting things the show is willing to embrace. It's just a shame the show isn't a bit more interesting the way it does it.
All right. It's called A League of Their Own. It's on Amazon Prime as we speak. In limited release right now is another documentary about Princess Diana called The Princess.
Now, Simon, this is unconnected to the Disney Plus movie from about 2 months ago.
Yes, it is, which caught you off guard earlier this week. It is unconnected to the Disney Plus movie, which I've watched and is pretty terrible. No, this is very much a retrospective of the life of Princess Diana, all done using archival footage taken from sources as vast as video cameras of the day, closed circuit TV, obviously the news footage of the time. While you may think we know all we need to know about Diana, what this does is puts it in a more contemporary context. We now understand what a terrible burden on her and her children, the royal protocols that Prince Charles and the Queen were on her life, and doubled down on that, the enormous war waged against her by certain sections of the British press, and to fuel that, the paparazzi in general. So once again, that may all sound familiar, but what this documentary does is paint a picture of a young woman who was in love and blinded by that love, and blinded over and over again by the role that she had taken on in British society and in British royalty, and maybe more profoundly, what she was able to do with it in terms of the charity work she did, the international travel she did to help those less fortunate than her, that she was continually doing right up until her very sad passing. So I'm no royalist. I'd be happy to go Republican in this country, but I think that Princess Diana exists in a world and leaves a legacy beyond that, and this documentary captures it. It's called The Princess, and it's in limited release around the country.
Yeah, look, I've got zero interest in this whatsoever.
But I'm always fascinated. Sometimes our age gap comes up, and I'm interested to know what Princess Diana represented to you as someone who was probably very young when that was all happening, as opposed to me, who was kind of soaking up the entirety of the Diana the train.
Like when she passed, like the only real connection that I had to her was that she'd been a presence in my life for years as a constant presence in like your Woman's Day magazines, that sort of thing. So I kind of remember it, but it's more just from the tail end post, like married to Prince Charles sort of like era of her life.
Or the scandal in the actual. See, I've got vivid memories of the wedding, of the early days of the romance. That was when I was sort of soaking up as much television and media as I could, and the impact that she had in a pre-internet age, of course, when everything was about what was happening in front of us on the television and in the newspapers, was all we had. So this one was a little bit heartbreaking. It was a little bit sad. It recalled a moment in history when this amazing woman came along, did incredible things despite much of her society working hard against her, and then left us far too soon.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I just find most of the roles more interesting in concept than I do like sitting down to actually watch any of this nonsense.
That's called The Princess. It's in limited release. And I should also point out very quickly that also in limited release, and I'm bummed that I didn't get to watch the screener link. I've had this for like 2 months. It's called The Conference. This is a World War II drama. It's about what the German hierarchy at the time in 1942 referred to as a meeting followed by breakfast. Now, that meeting was in fact the Wannsee Conference, or the Wannsee Conference, and it was where the heads of the Gestapo all gathered together to nut out the agenda that would become known as the final solution to the Jewish question. This is, by all accounts, a chilling film, one made by German filmmaker and German actors, and the reports are that it's one reviewer called it an ice cold masterpiece. So I'm keen to see this film. It's in limited release, called The Conference.
So Simon, earlier this week you sent me a message saying, Dan, Nope's out this week. I want to talk about UFOs and aliens and shit. And I said, sure. What are we going to talk about specifically? And you said, I'll get back to you. And then you never did, but I found a note in the rundown about 15 minutes ago, which explain what we're talking about here. So, Simon, what are we talking about here as I quickly try to scramble something together for this segment?
Sure, understand. I'm happy to take this one, brother. You know that I am an absolute UFO nut. I've just backed it up with my review of Nope. I'm calling this one UFOs and Aliens. They Walk Among Us. Film and TV has pondered the existence of extraterrestrial life since cameras began rolling. With Nope reworking the alien experience for a new generation, we fill this week's middle bit with the best and maybe worst of aliens and UFO lore on our big and small screen. It's been a go-to for filmmakers and storytellers forever, from when they were back painting on the side of caves to the very biggest budgeted of all films. So I'm happy to talk about UFOs and aliens on screens everywhere. You're a UFO person, aren't you?
Oh, look, I mean, I enjoy things across all sorts of genre. Like, I don't mind a UFO story here and there.
Look, we certainly can't deny that, you know, I'm coming from a point of my favorite movie of all time being Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So this is a movie that deeply impacted me, obviously left some kind of effect on me because I've been nuts about the UFO phenomenon. And over the last few years, where documentaries and podcasts have been thrown up in my face everywhere I turn about this topic, you've got to pick your material very carefully because there's some real crazies out there.
Okay, well, can I ask this question?
Yes.
So without doing a Simon Foster and naming every movie that's ever been made, if I was to ask you, what is one good underrated movie that's about aliens and UFO culture, what would you pick?
All right. Oh, okay. I am going to say The Vast of Night.
Okay, that was an Amazon Prime film from about 2 to 3 years ago, which is that's in the 1950s is it in New Mexico?
Yes, it is. It's very near to a certain famous UFO vicinity, if you know what I mean. Roswell. And yeah, The Vast of Night is this extraordinarily well-made, very excitingly told story of a small town population who get caught up in what may or may not be visitations in the night. And it is just extraordinarily well-directed. And so a lot of people don't know about The Vast of Night. It came out of the film festival circuit, but was picked up very early on by Amazon and went straight to the small screen. And I have always wanted to program it as part of my festival because I'd love to see the way this film looks on the big screen.
It's pretty good. I think the first 30, 40 minutes of it are incredibly compelling, and then it loses puff a little bit, but it's good.
Yeah, it holds a special place for me because it was I think it was one of the very first things we reviewed on this podcast or talked about on the podcast. But
it's possible.
It opens with this amazing tracking shot which goes on for 6 or 7 minutes, which is quite beautiful. Obviously aliens have been part of film culture for a long time. You can't talk about this sort of stuff without talking about E.T. or The Abyss or Starman. Signs was the other film. Signs is a movie, an M. Night Shyamalan movie that a lot of people are comparing Nope to and favorably to. If you just want to talk about the alien abduction experience, do watch the adaptation of Whitley Strieber's book Communion. The film stars Christopher Walken. It is a nutty film, but it is a compelling film to watch. And Milla Jovovich made a movie called The Fourth Kind, which also looked at alien abduction, which did so in a pretty terrifying way. In 1975, a TV movie called The UFO Incident was made. It told the story of Betty and Barney Hill, who were two of the earliest alien abductee cases. It starred James L. Jones and Estelle Parsons. And of all the crazy documentaries you might be able to find on your streaming platforms, arguably the best of them is called The Phenomenon from a couple of years ago, which took a very serious look at the New York Times article, which exposed all the UAP footage that the Navy had released and was about to release at the time. So that's my choice for the best of the UFO films. And I can't go without mentioning the great old TV series UFO, which had the shadow organization defending Earth from extraterrestrial threats. That was a Sylvia Anderson film. They put all their Thunderbird dollars into UFOs and it didn't quite pay off, but it had a great lead performance by Ed Bishop, who you may remember with the silver hair and the fringe cut across there, and just terrific bit of television.
I don't. So
really, you'd never seen UFO?
Sure, no.
Oh my god, it's wonderful. I got to send you some links. I'll put something up on the Facebook page.
Yeah, like I'm certainly aware of the program. I just haven't seen it.
Okay.
Okay, so I've spent a lot of time this last week thinking about this as a topic science. So much time this week. Okay, so when I was thinking about the best of them, like I figured I could very much do the obvious thing and talk about Close Encounters or Starman or any of that sort of thing. If I was going to pick out two of like the obvious things, I'd say the ones that probably mean the most to me is the movie Arrival, which I really got like a pretty sort of major kick out of. What I liked about that one is very much about communication, which is something I'm very interested in. And so that's films all just about communicating, both, creature to creature, as well as like an emotional communication of loss, which I think is kind of an interesting sub theme throughout that. But then the other big film that I liked was Contact with one Jodie Foster. That film, I think it's just the bee's knees. I'm all for that.
Wonderful.
But when I was thinking about like this as a genre, I started thinking about like just the not necessarily great movies, but definitely the things that just came to mind immediately for me. So there's pop cultural things which are just indelibly part of me.
Yep.
So I started my list with something which I think is legitimately very good and is absolutely amongst there with the best of them, which is an episode of The X-Files called Jose Chunks from Outer Space.
Yes.
And this is brilliant in that it takes, you mentioned Barney and Mrs. Hill.
Betty and Barney, yep.
Betty and Barney. The thing with them is that they were amongst the first in sort of UFO lore to be hypnotized and to be able to present their story. But what they do with their story is that not they, but in terms of the world, when we've heard the story and what they sort of revealed under hypnosis, is that there's so many other things that could have happened in their lives that have contributed to that. So there's this idea that they could have pulled episodes of the Twilight Zone and grabbed parts of that and sort of mixed it into the mythology that they're telling. But also it was partly Barney Hill was pulling bits about like World War II and the mass genocide of Jewish people being drawn into it, and like it was a sort of medical like aspect of it all, and it's just kind of pulling from the world and pulling it together. What's fun about this X-Files episode is it kind of does the same thing, and it really explores the way that people's mind and memory are shaped by all these things around and what they believe is a story of violation. And further to that, the way that people create a context to be able to just wave away anything that's like slightly uncomfortable about the reality of what people are believing happened to them. So it's sort of things like, oh, well, Betty and Barney Hill, one of the problems with them was that they were too consistent with their story. Okay, but then you hear about other people who had sort of, just odd aspects to their like UFO encounter story. So Jose Chunks from Outer Space kind of comes up with reasons to why that's the case. And it just explores it in a really funny, witty, but also really poignant way. It's a really great hour of TV.
It really is. And the X-Files guys, Chris Carter and the team, took on, alien lore and alien culture, obviously quite a bit in the show, but always did it from an informed, but occasionally irreverent point of view, which was wonderful.
Yeah, anyway, the rest of my list are just like the dumb things that I watched as a kid that I think about all the time in terms of.
We're going to be here a while, folks. Settle in.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the greatest of them all, Flight of the Navigator. Terrible movie, but I saw it as like it came out in say 1986-ish, and I was a 6-year-old. Like this was my jam entirely.
You know what? It always felt like a terrible movie to me. I've never watched it. I've never seen Flight of the Navigator. Even through the whole VHS years, it was everywhere, and I've just never got around to it because it had that kind of a stink about it.
Yeah, it's just a kid's VHS film. Like it's fine. Yeah. I loved it as a kid. Mac and Me, terrible movie. Loved it as a kid. Loved it.
I've got that on my worst of. Some of the worst movies ever made are alien films, and I've got a couple more. And Mac of Me was definitely on the list. It is an awful movie, completely paid for and sponsored by McDonald's.
Yep.
Which is extraordinary as a way of cashing in on the whole ET phenomenon that was happening at the time.
This film was watched so much in my household as a kid. I would dare suggest that I've got fonder memories of this than ET, which I've seen maybe once in my life.
Oh my God. It's such
and then
bad film.
Two absolute classic TV series, Mork and Mindy, starring the great Robin Williams and the even greater Pam Dawber.
Cha-ching. Yep, you're absolutely right. Good call.
And then also a little TV series called Alf.
Alien Life Form. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think it's kind of just a bit rude that they never refer to him by his actual alien name. Instead, it's always the name that us as humans gave him, which he seems to respond to.
What's his actual name?
Oh, Simon.
Jerry? Was it Jerry?
Look, as we all know from the animated series, Alf, the animated series, his name was Gordon Shumway.
Gordon Shumway, of course it was. Yes, I did know that.
And there's something very offensive about the fact that the viewers all call him Alf, the Tanner family, they all call him Alf, but his name's not Alf, it's Gordon Shumway. We should show some respect.
Should be Mr. Shumway. The show should have been called Mr. Shumway. We can't let this middle bit go without mentioning that the UFO/alien genre has also offered up Plan 9 from Outer Space and Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. So two of arguably the worst films ever made. Actually, Plan 9's not that bad, but well played, alien UFO genre. You managed to get some bad films in there as well. So that was the middle bit.
Sorry, I was trying to stop myself from criticizing your choices just then.
Well, a big fan of Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, are we?
No, I mean, just like talking about those two in terms of bad movies, it's kind of like saying, have you ever heard of the Beatles before? It's like, let's just
yeah, of course, yeah. No, you're right. It's shooting fish in a barrel when you talk about those two films. You're right. And I saw Plan 9 from Outer Space on the big screen at a retro screening once, and I didn't hate it. It's completely fine.
Oh, look, I wouldn't say it's completely fine, but there's far more egregious, terrible things. Like, it's not boring.
Absolutely, there is.
Like, I don't believe there's such a thing as bad movies. I think there's boring movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hardest bad movie I ever have trouble watching is a bad comedy. If it's a bad action movie, at least something explodes. Or if it's a bad space movie, there'll be laser beams. But when there's no laughs in a comedy, or everything is just totally at odds with what I think is funny and a comedy doesn't work for me, they really are the worst movies. The Dictator with Sacha Baron Cohen and the Russell Brand remake of Arthur were two of just the worst movie-going experiences of my life. Yeah,
no, I totally buy into that. I'm kind of amazed that we made it through that entire segment without talking about Under the Skin. Yeah, that's here nor there. Well, hey, Simon Foster, what else have you been watching lately?
Well, I had a TUBI Deep Dive this week. I really did go to extraordinary lengths not to do any work on my film festival, just to give myself a break from it. So I went into a TUBI Deep Dive and I stumbled across a film which I probably knew of at some point. The poster looked like a familiar VHS cover to me, but I'd forgotten it. It was called The Final Terror, which is a terrible name for a film. It starred a very young, very beautiful Rachel Ward.
Is this Fortress star Rachel Ward from a TV movie set in the Australian outback?
As shot in a cave, starring Rachel Ward. Yes, exactly. It starred
I found that on YouTube during the week, and I fast forwarded through the scene that gave me severe memory burn as a young man, and I watched that scene. I'm like, yeah, I totally get why.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
It starred a lovely Rachel Ward, a very young Daryl Hannah, who's maybe got 5 lines in the whole film.
That's the time I met Daryl Hannah.
I don't think you have. Is it an interesting story? We could use something interesting about now.
No, but I did meet her once. Well, it's not an interesting story. She was very nice.
Yeah, she seems nice. A very young Joey Pantoliano, Joey Pants, friend of the show. And it was all directed by Andrew Davis, who went on to do Under Siege and was Oscar nominated for The Fugitive. So The Final Terror is on Tubi. It's a beautiful cut of it. It's about this group of young people who get stuck in the wilderness, and there's a crazy person trying to hack them down. But it's all shot in a very big kind of cinematic way. So it's called The Final Terror. If you've got Tubi, give it a look.
I mean, everyone can have Tubi. It's free.
I know, that's the thing. And I found some amazing stuff on there. I'm considering doing a TUBI Deep Dive segment every week, just of all the stuff that I've been watching. I watched this other great film called Old Enough from 1984, this friendship story with two teenage girls in New York City, and it had like a 28-year-old Danny Aiello in it, which was amazing to see. Wow. I know. And they're all such great prints. Like they've obviously got them from DVD remasters or Blu-ray remasters, but both of those films were great sort of scratch-free copies.
These earphones that I'm currently listening to the podcast through right now,
yeah,
one of the ear has worked for like the last, how many episodes have we done now?
84 coming up.
Something like that. And so, like, every time we finish the podcast, I'm like, oh, I really need to replace these earphones. They're both working. I don't know what's going on, Simon.
That's
But anyway,
amazing.
that's neither here nor
My
there.
clarity is pumping through the wax that's building up on your earphones. What have you been watching, Dan?
Look, we talked about the Sandman earlier. That's something that I tried watching, and I have to say, I've just never big into the comics. Like, there was something about the faux literary merit of those books, and like, I'm not a big sort of mysticism, like dream logic person at the best of times, and so the Sandman comics never really resonated with me. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to give the show a look, and it's fine. I just found it was just a little bit slow and a bit plodding, and it was kind of so many things have been inspired by Sandman over the years that when it comes time to do an adaptation of it, like I just kind of feel I've seen this before and it just didn't really do much for me.
That's the feeling I've got. I don't know. And Charles Dance chewing the scenery like he does an awful lot. It feels like this is just ticking a lot of boxes to be safe and be a worthy watch rather than sort of trying to push any boundaries like Gaiman probably did with the comic back in the day. So yeah, I got to the end of the first episode, realized I'd nodded off a bit in that episode, went back and watched that bit, nodded off again, and here we are. I'll never watch the Sandman again, but good luck to those fans of the comic book out there who've been waiting a long time for this. I hope it tickles your Sandman bone.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't imagine there's anyone really going to Neil Gaiman at this point looking for something new. Like, I kind of feel like he's an established writer. He's in his like late 50s, early 60s now. Like, kind of what we expect from Neil Gaiman's what we get. And like, that's actually fine. Yeah. But like, I just kind of, there's other things I could be watching. And yeah, I was never quite under it, but yeah. But in a similar sort of milieu, as I do every week, I've been watching the TV show Evil. And what I think is just kind of interesting and why I thought I'd talk about it this week is that this is a show where for the first season or two, they certainly had storylines that kind of continued through the season. There was certainly elements of the show which they've revisited as time's gone on. But it's been interesting watching in the final, let's say, 4 episodes, this third season that's currently on, how much they really are reaching back through every thread that they've had. And they're kind of really just narrowly just focusing at the end of this third season to really tell us what the show has been doing this entire time. And it's just fascinating to see a show that has been so obvious in a lot of its storytelling to suddenly just reveal, oh, wait, you thought we were obvious earlier. No, we were actually being really obvious. And it's kind of really just focused really nicely as to what the show is. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, this actually makes all the sense. Like, I don't know how I haven't really brought these pieces together up until now.
You love this show. I think we have talked about Evil more than any other show in the history of screen watching, which I'm all for. I mean, what we're here to do.
One day you'll watch it, Simon.
Yeah, like I said, I started on season 1 and was completely on board, and then just life took turns in different directions, never went back to it. But yeah, no, I'm absolutely on board with it. I got no trouble talking about it. It looks like a lot of fun.
Here's my evidence that you're not fully on board with it. You took time to deep dive on Tubi this week to watch the final terror.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I know. The list of things, and you should see my list on Tubi. It's big. It's a big list on Tubi.
It's Queen. Okay, Simon, we're saving the date. What's going on?
All right, saving the date. September 2, House of Hammer. Yes, it sounds scary, and I'm sure it will be. This is a 3-part documentary series about Armie Hammer, his dark predilections, and not only that, but also his family's long history of and dark past, the debauchery that the Hammer name has cast in terms of American society. It debuts on the Discovery Plus channel, which is a US thing. Is it screening here in Australia, Dan? You'll know this sort of stuff.
No, I don't believe so. Not yet.
Okay, so watch out for that one called House of Hammer. Boy, has he fallen so far. The trailer is chilling, which you had on your Always Be Watching newsletter. So, I'm keen to see it.
Yeah, I don't think we get Discovery Plus in this country. I'm pretty sure we don't. Hey, December 15, there is a film called Avatar: The Way of Water, which I believe debuts in Australian cinemas in 129 days' time.
Yeah, I know. You're counting down. If you don't know, Dan's referring to his Twitter handle. He's changing it every day to count down towards Avatar: The Way of Water, which I think is very cute. Look at you. It's like you're having a school diary and you're ticking off the pages.
Yep. According to the notes you've left here, we get it one day after Belgium and Sweden, the same day as Malaysia and Slovakia, and one day before the USA and UK.
That's pretty impressive, isn't it? Yeah, it's rolling out across like that week around the world. So that's going to be a big deal. And mark your diaries, July 21, 2023 is the confirmed date for Barbie, the film starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, which we've mentioned previously on the podcast. And we'll probably mention again. It goes into US theaters July 21.
I can't help but feel this film's going to be incredibly stupid.
I'm hoping so. Although it's got Noah Baumbach as one of the writers and it's directed by Greta Gerwig. They're funny people, but they're not exactly wacky and zany, are they? I mean, maybe I'm keen to see the take they have on it.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. This week in history, Simon, on August 13, 19... I see the way that you've allocated us to talk about.
Yeah.
I feel it so that I'm not going to just derail the second one here.
That's exactly
but anyway,
right.
August 13, 1981, apparently the last broadcast of the Waltons took place on CBS TV.
And you'll be interested to know, Dan, that on August 14, 1967, celebrity hairdresser Vidal Sassoon cut actress Mia Farrow's hair into her famous pixie cut, which changed the way women's hair were cut and helped make Rosemary's Baby a huge, huge hit at the time. Yeah, I knew you were going to derail that, but I took it.
I mean, I find it interesting you said that I'll be interested in that. So, frankly, you're going to hear from my lawyers that's defamation. August 15, 2019, Disney became the first studio to have 5 films earn over $1 billion. That's billion with a B, $1 billion each in 1 year.
What might those 5 films be? If I was to say to you,
good game.
If you can name those 4 films, 2 were MCU titles, 2 were live action remakes, and 1 was the 4th sequel of something. What might they be?
Okay. I mean, you're giving me some hints there. So you said that they're 2 MCU films.
Yep.
I'm going to assume that they were... My assumption would automatically be that both of them are like the Avengers Endgame and the Avengers Infinity War.
No.
That's not true, because it's going to be Infinity War and Captain America Civil War.
Nope. No. You were right with Endgame. One of them's Avengers Endgame.
Is it like a Spider-Man film, maybe?
No.
But that's definitely not a Disney studio film, so that can't be right.
No.
Oh.
And then you've got your 2 live action remakes of Disney animated properties.
Okay, live action remakes. So 2019, that probably would have been...
Tester.
I mean, there was The Lion King, but that's not live action.
That's another one, yeah.
Okay, we're considering that live action? Sure.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Photorealistic. So you've got Endgame and Lion King. Come on, people, phone in if you know the answers. The numbers.
Like maybe Cruella?
No.
Was that a 2020 release?
2019. No. Was it 2020 or 2019?
But no, it was 2020. It was like post-pandemic, because that was a film that came out via like Disney Plus as a pay for add-on.
You've got Endgame. What would have been the 4th sequel in a popular franchise that made that sort of money?
From Disney. What are 4 movies?
It was a beautiful film. Arguably my favorite of the franchise.
Oh god, this is gonna be something terrible, I can tell. Gosh, I don't know, Simon.
Toy Story 4.
Okay, which I didn't see. I keep forgetting there's a 4th one, to be honest.
Made a lot of money. The other MCU title is Captain Marvel.
Okay, I'm surprised that made $1 billion.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Well, then there's Aladdin, which was the other live action remake, and I'm surprised that made $1 billion too. So there you go. That's the 5 films that made muchos.
Yeah, I guess it's probably the Will Smith facts with that film. I hear it slaps.
Yes, this was pre-slap. And on August 17, 1979, Monty Python's Life of Brian premiered in US theaters to a rousing, raucous acclaim.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
Simon, you can slap this one off.
Sebastian Stan was born August 13, 1982. He, of course, went on to star in Pam and Tommy, one of the aforementioned MCU films. I can't remember which one it was. He was in The Gecko and the Flying Lizard or something, wasn't he?
That's right. He was the gecko. Yeah. August 14, 1945, the second best of the 3 amigos was born, one Steve Martin.
Yes, interesting to read on your newsletter this week that he'll be retiring.
Well, no, that's not strictly true. He says that
he's
he can't
working
envision
through
doing
his
it.
retirement. He can't envision working again after Murders in the Building, which is
Yeah.
yeah,
So
interesting.
he's saying that he won't be doing any movies or TV shows anymore, which I believe that. But he also says he won't do any cameos either, which I find like, I mean, not that he's really done a lot of that, but like, surely if Tina Fey called, he'd do something.
Can't imagine a world without Steve Martin on screen. August 15, 1990, Jennifer Lawrence was born, star of The Hunger Games and the wonderful film Joy. Don't know why it was called Joy.
August 16, 1954, James Cameron, director of Avatar: The Way of Water, which will be released into cinemas in 129 days' time.
That's exciting. And we do want to sign off by, of course, saying, well, I want to do it because she was such a huge influence on my life. The lovely Olivia Newton-John, rest in peace. My heart was a little bit broken this week. She was my high school crush. And to hear she's gone doesn't wipe away memories of Twist of Fate, one of the worst movies ever made, but made
What
me
about A
think
Mum
of-
for Christmas?
for Christmas. Yeah, look, you get past Grease. She didn't have a huge impact upon the world of cinema. I love Xanadu. Don't get me started on Xanadu. I've spent my life defending that film. But yes, rest in peace, Libby. Sorry that cancer was such a dick of a thing to you all those years, and thank you for being who you were for all of us.
Can I take conversation back to Steve Martin?
Sure.
Best Steve Martin film, go.
Roxanne.
Okay, that was mine as well. Folks, thank you very much for listening to Screen Watching. My name's Dan Barrett. You can find me on Twitter at the Dan Barrett. Start your day with my free newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching at alwaysbewatching.com. It's got the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. And on Friday, you got the Always Be Streaming newsletter, which recounts the big shows that launched that week. Roxanne, I only saw for the first time, like maybe about 3 or 4 months ago.
Wow, I went to a preview screening of it even before it was released, which was all those years ago, and just fell in love with it and seen it so many times since. But so many great films. Parenthood's another one I'd say up there as well. Read my words over at screen-space.net. Visit the Screen Watching Facebook page. Important you go to the Screen Watching YouTube channel. We have interviews up there with Tyler Atkins, who directed the Australian film Bosch and Rocket, and Emma Holly-Jones, who directed Mr. Malcolm's List, a wonderful British period drama. They're both up on our YouTube channel, or will be by the time this goes to air. And a quick reminder, get on over and buy your tickets for the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival. We have lots of available seats and plenty of tickets to sell around the country. Go to the event site or Cinema Nova if you're in Melbourne.
It's a mail plane, and you can tell because of the ball. Okay.
What?
Folks. I know you're 3 amigos. Hey, latest note. Follow Screen Watching via your favorite podcast app. Load it up now. Hit the follow button, and this podcast and all the magic within it will just flow into your eardrums.
A good place for this magic to be. My favorite joke from 3 Amigos is when he's up on top of the wall there and he's going, "Look up here, look up here,
Here,
hey, you
here,
guys,
crack. What's great is, do you remember there was that terrible, I think it was a DreamWorks animated film, Robots?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
There's a scene where one of the robots is trying to get the attention of the other ones, and he does the entire 3 Amigos. Guys, up here, up here, up here.
Up here.
And I remember watching that in the theater, and I was laughing and laughing and laughing, and silence from the rest of that theater.
But you know what the funny payoff was that Chevy Chase has to tap Martin Short on the shoulder and point up to get him to look up. He does. It had so many great jokes in it.
The funniest joke in that is just Martin Short, it's like that sort of sequence where it's like at the end of the day and I've just kind of won everyone over. And Martin Short's there and he's telling stories about when he was like a child actor.
Little Nettie Nicolanders.
Yeah. And he's just telling like these kids who are like listening to him like deeply enraptured about like these really terrible just Hollywood stories and like the magic of like just Hollywood wank. And like these kids are just watching him as though like, he's the most fascinating person in the world. It's great. It's like this little throwaway thing that only works because it's Martin Short.
Or when they're walking across the desert and they're running out of water and Chevy Chase is pouring water flows and then he puts the lip balm on and offers them the lip balm.
I just like where he's smacking his lips. Anyway, guys, this has been Screen Watching. We'll be back with more 3 Amigos remembrances next week.
Bye-bye.